we project a false self that is imagined to be persisting over time. So we think it is me who was the child and who was the young man and who was now an adult and all the rest. But the reality is, every moment there is just the spontaneous expression of energy. The I that I take myself to be is simply a spontaneous expression of energy, the false I. So, in each interaction, there is the subject and the object in each interaction, and both the subject and the object are simply projected due to the divine intelligence that is making everything arise spontaneously. So when we see something, or when we hear, smell, taste, or touch, or when we think, speak, or do something, in all these instances, there is a spontaneous subject rising as me, and there is the spontaneous object of the cognition or the action, and there is the interaction between the two. So these three together, called the triad, is how life flows, time flows. And if we only look carefully, we will see that this triad rises spontaneously each moment. There is no entity choosing to see or choosing to hear or choosing to think or even choosing to do anything. We think, we imagine that I am making a choice to even act in certain ways. But even the choice is based on thought, and the thought that rises spontaneously. So the source of a thought that is behind an action is always a mystery. We may consciously think that I chose to act in a certain way, but that choice to act in a certain way is based on the memory that is there subconsciously and consciously, and that entire collection of memory acts without even in many cases, without even consciously aware of it. It automatically presents a choice, and we think I am making the choice. And even if it's a conscious memory acting, it's still the memory that's acting itself out. So in every instance, it is therefore the spontaneous expression of energy that makes activities possible. So if we see this clearly, then there is no question of any notion of progress, any notion of becoming enlightened, and all the rest. The only thing that is hiding this is this cloud of ignorance. So there is nobody here in reality as a separate self, even now. There is only the divine intelligence, and the divine intelligence springs forth from within each of us. We can feel it rising from our heart. And what rises from the heart is impersonally rising as the conscious spark which is what we call as the individual soul. But in reality, it is not individual at all, because it is just the same conscious spark in every single living entity. Only when that conscious spark gets identified with the body, with the memory, we think it's me. So the personality we project is the false knot between the conscious spark and the ever changing flow of time in the form of memories and body and thoughts and all the rest. So the conscious spark is always free because it is simply there, and the movement of time, body, and mind, and all of that is happening by the divine intelligence. So there is no separate me in either. The only separate me is the imaginary knot between the two. When we falsely identify with the ever changing flow of thoughts and feelings and memories and the body and all that, then we associate I with that, and then we are caught in that false identification. But it's very clear if we see this, that that I is changing all the time. So we may say I am fat or I am thin based on looking at the body. Then the next moment we may say I am smart or I am dumb, depending on how we are approaching a particular problem, let's say. Then we may say I am healthy or sick, depending on the state of the body. Then we may say I am this or that. So that the word that comes after I am is always changing constantly, and yet we take that to be the same as I am. What rises as I am is simply the conscious spark, and that is always free, but the identification is always changing. So the problem is neither with I am nor with what comes after I am. The problem is only with the two being joined together. So the body is, let's say, sick or healthy. That's a true statement. I am is a true statement. But when the two combine and say I am sick, then that becomes a false statement. It's as simple as that. The body is sick, I am. Both are true. But when they both combine and say I am sick, it becomes false. Because I am not sick, the body is sick, and I am. Similarly, let's say there is anger. There is anger in the body because every emotion is again only the movement of energy in the body. Every thought is also ultimately only physical. That's why thought is matter. Thought is material because thought is nothing but movement of neurons in the brain. Feelings are also just various energetic movements in the body. So we feel various movements in the stomach or in the heart or in the brain, in the knees, wherever. That's why they say knees grow weak sometimes, or the stomach is upset, or it manifests in different parts of the body, different energies. And I am, but when the two combine and say I am angry or I am happy, then it becomes false statement. So the only thing is to decouple the two and recognize that I am is ever true, and whatever the movement of energy is also relatively true because it's happening, but it's only relatively true because it's constantly changing. But what is completely untrue is the linking between the two. So if we recognize this clearly, then there is no question of progress in this, or attaining anything in this, or judging ourselves, or looking at how we have, let's say, moved in this journey and all of that, because every such activity is only an activity of thought. And when we identify that with I am, we again make the same mistake. So there is no difference between the one who is, let's say, very vain and thinks and attached, let's say, is attached to the looks or to his other attributes, and the mistake someone makes by identifying with the spiritual seeking, let's say. So the whole process is only to therefore unlearn, not to gain anything. And therefore, it's not something that is an acquisitive process. It's not acquiring anything over time. It is not attaining anything. It is not gaining anything. It is not even losing anything because there is nothing to be lost. It is simply seeing things as they are. So if we see things clearly as they are, then we see that we are already free. It is not that we have to lose even anything or unlearn anything. We simply have to clearly see, and we can see only now. So that is the only purpose of satsang. That is the purpose of meditation as well. That is the purpose of all true wisdom. And that is the pointer of all great sages. Therefore, when we approach this, we have to be very clear that we are not trying to acquire anything or gain anything. We are simply seeing clearly the very nature of our being. That is self inquiry, that is self knowledge, that is self abidance, and that is surrender. Surrender is used because we do not get identified with the course of events and thereby get frazzled by it. We simply let it be, do whatever is necessary at the moment, each moment, and let it be. Therefore, surrender is the other side of self knowledge. When we recognize that our true self is free ever, and the activities of the body and mind are also happening spontaneously on their own, therefore, they are left to their devices, which is the divine intelligence, and that's surrender. And the pure being simply rests in its own pure being, and that's self abidance. So both are simply two sides of the same coin. They're not two paths again or two ways to realize. All of these ideas come only because of the false identification with me as separate from some goal of self realization. Only then the idea of path and way and all that comes. It is simply a direct recognition here and now that the true nature of being is unaffected, and the true essence of matter is constantly to move by its own energy, and both are perfect in their own way. That's all. It's like how the sun is there and the clouds are there. The clouds are seen only by the light of the sun. It is not that there is a different light that illuminates the clouds. The very cloud that hides the sun is actually seen by the light of the sun. Similarly, the very energy of matter that that seems to hide the true being is actually perceived only through the source, which is the true being. And therefore, just as the sun is ever shining, whether there are clouds or not, and clouds are ever passing, and they do not get affected by anything and they do not affect the sun. Similarly, we are also having this same essence that there is the pure being and there is the constant spontaneous flow of becoming. And to see that clearly is to be free. So the only necessary vigilance is therefore to not get falsely identified with the clouds again. So anything that rises is not me. It is just rising on its own. And when we see this clearly, then it falls in the right place. It's only false identification that acts as the charge which makes more and more of these clouds to appear. When we recognize this truth, then the movement of energy also falls in the right place. Thoughts rise only when necessary, feelings that are necessary come up, the body, whatever is necessary is being done. So it's not that the body stops or the thoughts stop or anything like that, but they just do not have the same kind of intensity before or the same kind of power before. They fall in the right place and the being simply remains as being. So that's all there is to the whole thing. And we simply have to recognize this. And the moment there is an identification with the moving spontaneous flow of energy, we have to be vigilant and not get caught in that. And that is why the question, who am I, is also only for that purpose. It is not to repeat it like a mantra or use it to gain something new or anything like that. It is simply a question that removes the false identification. Who is sick, for example? When something as simple as the thought I am sick comes, if you ask who is sick, then the body is sick, and the body being sick and not is moving constantly changing, and I am is that which cannot be known by thought. It's the very ground in which thought even rises. So all perceptions happen in this ground alone, and therefore with every such thing, whether it's a feeling, an emotion, anything that there is, if we ask who is feeling this, we will see that it's got nothing to do with I. It is simply that which rises and flows, and yet that is seen in the light of the pure being. Just as clouds are seen by the light of the sun, they are seen by the light of the pure being. And that is the non verbalized I, which is our true self. So we don't have to, therefore, again, if we make it into another thought that I am the pure self or I am this, all of that is again rising in that which cannot be named. So when we reify this in any way, by giving it a name, by giving it any kind of concept, the paradox is all that is also happening as thought movement. And what is at the ground of that thought movement is that which cannot be known. So the attempt to capture the self is again happening as a movement of thought on the ground of self, which is unknowable. Therefore, when we recognize this, then there is nothing to capture. Every attempt to capture the truth is only a movement of thought. Every attempt to realize is a movement of thought. Everything that happens, therefore, is only the movement of the divine intelligence, which is thought and mind and body and all that. So when we see this clearly, that the ground of being cannot be named, cannot be realized, because it's already that which is ever present, and that which comes and goes, then that is the essence of being still. When Ramana Maharishi says, be still, summa iru, this recognition is what is summa iru, or be still. We are not either trying to realize the true self or getting identified with the false self. The true self is ever realized and the false self never is. So this recognition is self-inquiry, is surrender.